Hello, everyone. This is Big Cat, and this is my very first YouTube video ever. So just bear with me. I'm very new to this. I'm recording this with a webcam, so don't be expecting super great video for a while till I get used to editing this. I am coming to you from my man cave, my basement. This is where I can keep all my stuff. We got 3 kids, and I can keep my stuff here without having to worry about them getting into it. So you see I got my reloading bench behind me, and that's what this video series is going to be on. I actually have a friend of mine I met online, Larry. His name's Larry, and he was a United States Marine Corps sniper. And we got to talking, and I was telling him about how I do my reloading and stuff. And this professional, asked me for advice about reloading, what to get, how to do it, all this and that. Well, I spent many, many, many hours going through all kinds of YouTube videos, reading all kinds of material, and sorting through what was real and what was bullshit to come up with a system that works well for me. And I decided that rather than trying to tell him all these resources to look at and go through all that bullshit by himself, I was going to make this series of videos, and I'm going to dedicate them to you, Larry. So, Larry, this is all for you and anybody else that's interested. So as you can see, like I said, my reloading bench is behind me, and I'm going to get it out of the way right now. My motivational poster back here, if you don't like it, you're watching the wrong fucking channel. Get the hell out. All right, it's there. That's all the motivation I need to do what I do. So with that out of the way, basically this video is basically an intro to reloading. It is the absolute basics. All I'm doing is showing you components, showing you equipment, different tools, and giving you the basics. I'm not actually going to be doing any reloading in this video. So if you know all this shit already, you can go ahead and skip to the next one. If not, if you're starting from scratch, this is a great place to start. So what is reloading? Reloading is taking a group of components, generally your brass or your shell, your primer, which is the ignition, your powder, which is the propellant. With smokeless powder, it's propellant, and your bullet. We put them together as a cartridge, and then that cartridge is what you load in your gun. The firing pin hits the primer goes off, lights the propellant, lights the powder, boom, makes a whole bunch of hot gas, and fires that bullet out of that gun at over the speed of sound for a lot of loads. If you get into a lot of the higher end 44 Magnum loads and up, they easily break the sound barrier, 1,600 feet per second, I think it is, something like that. But anyway, so here's some of your components. All right, brass is a 45 ACP brass. It's been pre-fired. Primer's already been taken out of it. Normally, whenever I start, the old primers are already in there. This one just happens to have it out. All right. Then you got your primers. I buy them in boxes of 1,000 because you go through a lot, and it's cheaper just to buy them by the 1,000 than it is to buy them by the 100. Which, when you buy them by the 1,000, you open it up and you get these little boxes here. All right, and then each of these boxes here, you slide it open, and let's see if I can get this in there. Right there are all of your primers. All right, oh, I'm going backwards here. Right there's all your little primers lined up in nice, neat little row. Okay, so you got your shell, you got your primers, you need your powder. Many different kinds of powder, and we'll go over that later. But necessary component, without the powder, no boom, no bullet come out of the gun. And finally, you got the bullet. Now, I happen to be a bullet caster as well. I collect scrap lead, I melt it down, I cast it into bullets, and these little guys here, dirt cheap for me. I can reload a 45 ACP cartridge, I figured it out, I did the math, for 8 cents a round. Now, for those of you who don't want to do the math, that comes out to $4 for a 50 round box. $4. You can't get better than that. You can shoot all day with $4 a box. Now, the thing with reloading, and a lot of books say this, a lot of people say this, and it's absolutely true. You are not going to save money reloading. It's just not going to happen. All right. What's going to happen is you're going to shoot more. You're going to target shoot more. You're going to improve your skills, and it's going to cost you less money to do it. But you're not going to save money because you're going to shoot more. Because there's a lot of money wrapped up in all this equipment. And I know I haven't made it back. I'm getting there, but I haven't made it back. All right, so bullet, and we'll go over these later. Okay, well, you need a press to put all this stuff together. And there's many different kinds of presses. They're all over the place. You can find them at flea markets, at yard sales, if you get lucky. And a lot of these older presses are bulletproof, tough sons of bitches. Impossible to break. I started out with this guy right here, the RCBS Rock Chucker. Is basically one of the most basic and toughest presses around, been around forever. I think you can even load 50 cals out of this. I don't know, I haven't tried it, I don't have a 50 cal. But they are tough, and they will work. This is called a single stage press. With a single stage press, you have to do every action, change your dies to do the next action. Alright, and we'll get into dies here in a minute. Alright, my other press that I have right here, this blue guy right here, this is a Dillon RL550B progressive press. Now, as you notice, this guy is a bit bigger, a bit more complicated. It's got a powder measure already built onto it. It's got a holder for 4 dies. And basically what this does is every time you pull the handle, you put a shell in, you rotate the plate, set a bullet on the next shell. Once you have 4 shells in this holder, every time you pull the handle, a bullet pops out. Now, you'll see, because my first video, I'm going to do 50 rounds on the RCBS. I'm going to show you how that is. And just to save you a bunch of grief and me a gigantic upload, I'm going to see if I can figure out with my software how to time-lapse that and show you just how long that takes with me doing it super fast Benny Hill style. All right. But anyway, so this guy here, now the differences between these two presses, all right? I started with that because it came with a kit. It was relatively inexpensive. I think I paid right just under $400 for it, and it came with everything I needed to go ahead and start reloading right away. I mainly reload pistol calibers. I do reload some rifle. I reload some 7mm, some 7.62 by 54 Russian for Mosin Nagant. And I'm going to be getting into reloading 6mm for my old lady's deer rifle. My stepson does a 270, and we also have 243 and 30-06. I got to get into reloading all those. Now for rifle rounds, if you're going for precision, you can't beat the single stage press. Because with the single stage press, you can take your time, you can make sure your bullets are all seated to the exact same length. You can make sure that every powder charge is exactly the same, and it just gives you much better quality control, but it gives you that at the cost of speed. Now, for those high caliber rifles, you're not going out and shooting 400 rounds a day, 400, 500 rounds a day. I can easily go out with my 45 ACP and crank out 300 rounds in a day and not think anything of it. So that's this guy's big strength, is precision. Whereas this guy here is all about speed. All about speed. When you're making a completed round with every pull of the handle, the time savings are just amazing. You're talking 50 rounds per hour average versus between 300 and 500 rounds per hour. 300 and 500 rounds per hour, depending on how used you are to the machine and how quick you can go and what other goodies you have on it. I have pretty much the basic machine right here. Okay, so I'll give you the stuff with my Rock Chucker, the single stage press. You're using a single stage press. There's some other things you need, which the kits come with this stuff. One of the things you need, right over here, shell holder. Now these things come in handy. They got all different kind of size holes, and basically this is for putting your shells in as you're reloading them. Let's see, which hole do we want here? Right, see, it slides in right there and holds your shell up. That way, when you resize and deprime it, you can put it in here, go to your next one, resize and deprime, go to your next one, and all the way through. And each one of these blocks holds 50 rounds. All right, so you got your blocks. Rock Chucker kit comes with one of these. I bought an extra one just so I could do 100 rounds at a time instead of 50. Okay, you need some kind of a tool to put the primer in. Alright, you need a tool to put the primer in the shell. Oh, god damn it. This computer. Oh, bear with me for a second because I can't see myself. There we go. Alright, so you need some kind of a tool to put the primer in. Alright, so what we got here, this is RCBS's hand priming tool. And basically you put the primers inside here. It's got a built-in flip tray, which I'll show you whenever we actually do the reloading. And you slide that right into here. Alright, you put your shell holder in here, which I'll show you what they are. Then you just slide the bottom of your shell into that shell holder. You squeeze this handle, and a ram will come up and push a primer up into the bottom of that shell. And that's how you prime them. You got to have a primer. This guy here has a primer built into him and a primer feed system. It's got this tube here, holds 100 primers. So you're good to go for 100 rounds before you got to reload this tube. So that covers your primer. Now for your powder, you need a powder measure. Alright, you got this guy right here is RCBS powder measure for doing the single stage. On the Dillon, it's got a powder measure built in, and I'll show you how to calibrate that whenever we actually get into using the Dillon. That's a little bit more advanced. But this guy here works just as good. Dump your primer in there. You got an adjusting knob right here that you spin, and that adjusts how much primer comes out. And basically, you hold your shell there, you flip the handle, powder comes out into your shell, and then you got to take and you need a scale. Now this is RCBS beam scale. Alright, and a lot of other companies have these beam scales. They do work. They're not super precise, but they're accurate enough for what I do right now. You can get a digital scale. Digital scales are much more precise, much nice. You can get them with a powder trickler built in so that they can give you 1/100th of a grain accuracy, but you're going to be spending upwards of $200 for one, which I wasn't able to justify the cost for it right off the bat. So you got your scale. Now you also need a die set. And what is a die set? Well, when you get your brass, which most of us will be using fired brass, reloaded brass. You pick up your brass and reload it. Some people sometimes you might have to go out and buy brass to reload it. I save all my brass, and even when I buy brass, I buy once fired brass. And you need a die kit. And this is a die kit. This one's for my 44 Magnum. I don't know if you can even read that. 44 Special 44 Magnum. It's a 3-die kit. It's a pistol die kit for straight-walled cases. And it comes with 3 dies. You got 3 stages. Your first stage, well, actually, technically you got 4 stages. One of the dies does 2 things at the same time, but I'll get into that. Okay, but your first die is your resizing and decapping die. And basically what that is, when you fire a shell, the brass expands inside the chamber. It gets bigger. And you need to shrink that back down to its original size. So that's what these guys do. You put this in the press, put the bullet underneath. When you pull the handle, it forces the brass up inside this die. And there's a pin in here that when the brass goes in, this pin pops out the primer. So that's how you get the primer out. And then the inside here, the brass goes up inside there and it squeezes it down and shrinks it back to its original size. And that's your step 1 on your reloading process. Step 2 is belling. You got to bell out the brass where the bullet goes in. Where the hell did my brass go? I'll grab another one here. Alright, but you got to bell out your brass. So you push it up in there and you adjust it and you bell out the end of your brass. Because what happens is that when your brass is straight and not belled, it's hard to get that bullet seated in there straight. It wants to go crooked, and when you go to press the bullet in, it's going to cut the bullet. If it's a lead bullet, if it's a jacketed bullet, you're destroying your brass. You might destroy your brass anyway on a lead bullet. So you got to bell out the mouth. Alright? And then your last die, this is the one that actually performs two functions that I prefer to do separate. You can do them together, and sometimes they work. When I was doing my 38 specials on my single stage press, I did both actions together, and it worked just fine because I used mild loads and I didn't need a real strong crimp. But what this does is this is the bullet seeder and crimping die. So you put the bullet on top of the brass, and forces up in here. This thing holds the bullet straight, and it pushes the bullet down into the case. And you adjust this for your maximum bullet length, your maximum cartridge length, which is very important in like automatics, anything that uses a magazine. It can be important in some revolvers, but generally they have an awful lot of leeway in there. Rifles, it can be especially important. Anything there, you got to chamber the round. Overall length can be very important, because if you have your length too long and you're reloading for a bolt action rifle, you go to close that bolt, it might not give enough room. And what happens is if you force that, then you're forcing that bullet up into the lands and grooves in the rifle, and you're going to cause a high pressure situation whenever the rifle fires, and it's going to give you inconsistent accuracy. So you got to seat the bullet in there. And then the second operation is the crimp. And there's two different kinds. Well, there's three different kinds. There's a factory crimp on rifles. But generally on handgun shells, there's two different kinds of crimps. There's a taper crimp and there's a roll crimp. Taper crimp is generally used on automatics, 45 ACP, 40 Smith & Wesson, 9mm, 380. They use a taper crimp. Your roll crimp is generally used on your higher recoil revolvers. So we're talking 357 Magnum, 44 Magnum, 454 Castle. You know, those big hand cannons, because the recoil on those is so vicious that when it recoils, that bullet can actually pull out of that case and make it longer, and it can actually pull out so far that it sticks out past the cylinder and won't let the cylinder rotate. So you got to use the right crimp, and you got to put enough crimp on it without crimping it too hard. If you're crimping it so hard that it's actually cutting through the outside of a plated bullet, or you see it pinching lead, you're crimping it too tight. Unless you're having issues with that particular load and that particular weapon where the bullet is working its way out, generally a light crimp, light to medium crimp is all that's really needed. I prefer doing the crimp in a separate step because I've run into issues. Like I said, I do it with my 38 special target loads because they're very light loads. They're a very light powder load, very low kick. My old lady uses them target with. My 14-year-old daughter target shoots with them. And I like to keep them manageable so that they have an enjoyable time instead of having sore wrists and elbows every time they go out target shooting. So the issue you can run into when you're crimping and seating at the same time is if you're running a heavier crimp, like a medium to heavy crimp, because what can happen is you can be crimping that before the bullet is seated all the way in as far as you want it. So what happens is it can shave lead off the side of the bullet. It'll collapse the case. I've had them actually completely collapse the case, because when you pull on that handle, you are putting a lot of force on this and you don't realize it, and you'll collapse the case and not even know it because it's all up inside the die when this happens. So I prefer doing the bullet seating first, and then on a single stage you got to take this die out and then you got to readjust it to bring the bullet seater up so that you can set it up to do your crimp and then do your crimping on the next stage. The RCB or the Dillon RL450B has the extra stage so that I actually go out and I buy another bullet seating and crimping die, or just a straight crimping only die for my fourth stage on this. So my third stage will seat the bullet, and then my fourth stage will crimp it. And I just get a separate die for that. That way I don't have to do the seating and crimping at the same time. And it really doesn't increase my workload because it already has 4 stages. There's no point in having a stage not used. You might as well get a crimping die and use it. So that's your die sets. And I'm concentrating on pistols right now. They also do them for rifles. Rifles are a little different, which I will do a video on reloading rifle rounds, as much as I hate to do them because they're a pain in the ass. But there's different ways to do them, and I'll show you some of the different things for accuracy when you do neck resizing versus full case resizing and that kind of thing. You have to use bullet lube on them because most dies now, especially pistol dies, straight wall pistol dies, are all carbide dies, which means you don't need to use lube on them. You can just put the case right up in there, pull it back down, no lube needed. But on rifle cases, or even some pistol cases that have a neck, if it has a neck, you gotta lube it. And that's an extra process where you gotta roll the cases on a lubing pad, you get your fingers all yucky, you gotta put it up in there and resize it, then it comes out, then you gotta clean them all off, clean all that goop off of them, and go through, and it's just a whole extra step that's a pain in the butt, but it's necessary for most rifle cases. Now, the only rifle cases that you would really do on a Dillon, probably, would be like 223s if you were a masochistic person and wanted to reload 223s for your AR. Or the 5.56. 5.56, 223, basically the same thing. If you want to reload your own hundreds of those on one of these Dillons, you can. There's people that do it. You still need to lube your cases. And you still need to run them through the resizer. And you will crank out hundreds of rounds in a day, several hundred, 1,000 rounds in a day. I don't know. I don't do them. But for the price of ammo now, I just go out and buy it. And I don't shoot them that much. I prefer shooting my pistol rounds. They're easy to load. They're cheap. They're fun. You have a great time, especially shooting silhouettes and stuff like that with the handguns. So that is the dies. You need the dies. Alright, what else do we need? We got to cover the dies. And then there's other little odds and ends that you can get here. Like when you screw up around, and everybody's going to screw up around, you need the old handy dandy bullet puller. And this guy basically, if you screw up around, put the round inside there, take and smack the shit out of this onto something like a hammer. I just smack it on my rock chucker press there, and the bullet will fly out of the case, powder will come out, and you can separate it all. You can reuse the bullet if the bullet's not damaged. You can even reuse the powder because the powder is sealed up in the case. I generally just throw it out. And you can reuse the case. Now, if you got concerns about the primer, if the primer's seated too deep or something like that, you can throw it out. Generally, you want to soak it in water or something, throw it out. If you really, really need to save that case, if it's a pretty rare case, a pretty expensive case, 50 Action Express or 50 BMG, something like that, you can actually take and pour some mineral oil down in the case, and that will dampen the primer and basically destroy the primer, and then you can run it through your decapping die and press that primer out without having to worry about it exploding on you, which is always good. Nobody wants an explosion at their press whenever they got all kinds of propellant and primers, which are explosives. Primers are explosives. And you got all kinds of other stuff. I haven't even gotten into brass polishers, the tumblers for the brass polishing. I haven't gotten into reaming the cases, resizing them, because like I said, I concentrate on pistol rounds, and you can reload. My two main ones I do are 38 Special and 45 ACP, and you can reload that brass probably hundreds of times. I mean, I've never found a brass in any of my 38s and 45 ACPs that I've reloaded that's stretched out of limits. So that stuff now with rifle brass has a lot more power, a lot more pressure, and you're going to get a lot less reloads. Like 7mm, I shoot 7mm Remington Magnum. You can generally get between 6 and 10 reloads out of them. You got to keep trimming them down because the brass liquefies and stretches a little bit. Now, I don't do full case resizing. I do neck resizing, so I don't got to worry about annealing the brass and softening it up. Because with a full case resize, you're resizing the entire case back down to factory specs. Well, I only own one 7mm rifle, and that's all I use my 7mm in. So basically, my fired brass is now fire formed to the chamber of my rifle. What that means is it fired, my brass expanded, and it's now the size of the chamber of my rifle. So instead of resizing that whole brass, I'll just resize the neck down to the shoulder. All right, so that whenever I put a bullet in, the bullet doesn't just drop the whole way through. And then I'll go through belling and putting powder in and primer and putting my bullet in. Now those bullets are perfectly chamber sized for my rifle, which means whenever I shoot them, they're going to be more consistent because that brass isn't expanding in that chamber now because it's already the same size as the chamber. Now, will that brass work in another 7mm? Maybe, but probably not, because each one is different. It's like fingerprints. Every rifle is different. So when you fire form brass to the size of your chamber, basically that brass is for that rifle. You don't want to try and use it in another rifle. It could jam up. It could cause all kinds of problems. It could jam in there when you try and extract it. It could actually rip the head off the bottom, and then you got all kinds of problems trying to get stuck brass out of the chamber. It's just not worth it. One other thing I just thought of that you need, and these, there's no substitute. You absolutely have to have these. There's no getting around them. Yes, they're books. Reloading manuals. Lyman is a good one. Hornady, another good one. And I have a Speer one around here somewhere. I don't know where that one got to. And then another one, if you're thinking about getting into casting your own bullets, the Lyman Cast Bullet Handbook. It's getting hard to find. You find it on eBay, you find it on Amazon, find it at your local gun shop. Buy one up. They're like $20. They're worth it. All right. Because what these books do is these books tell you what powder charge to use based on the shell, the bullet weight, and even the type of bullet you're using. Because some bullets seat deeper than others. A full wad cutter will seat the whole way down into the case, whereas a semi-wad cutter will seat up out of the case. When you seat a whole way down in, you create less space in there for the gas to expand, which means your pressures are going to change, and they can change a lot. So your powder is going to be different. And then there's also different powder requirements for cast bullets versus jacketed bullets. Now, the thing with these reloading books, because they're made by Hornady, guess what Hornady makes? Bullets. You got Lyman. All right, you got Speer. Guess what Speer makes? They make bullets too. And their loads in their books say that they're for their bullets. All right. Now, does that mean you have to go out and buy Speer or Hornady bullets if you're reloading jacketed, full metal jacket, hollow pointed bullets? No, absolutely not. Basically, you need to match the bullet weight, the bullet grain, and the bullet type, be it a round nose, a truncated cone, full wad cutter, semi-wad cutter, hollow point, whatever. All you got to do is match the bullet weight and type of bullet with your case, and then I go through every manual, seeing what they have, if they have that, and seeing what their recommendations are. And if this manual says maximum recommendation is 4.5 grains of bullseye, and this one says 4.2 grains of bullseye, well, I'm going to err on the side of caution, and my maximum load isn't going to go above 4.2 grains of bullseye. Just because, erring on the side of caution, on the side of safety. Now, some revolvers, you can play around in the danger zone. Specifically, the ones that are really known for it are Rugers. Ruger Blackhawks, the Ruger Super Blackhawks are made tough. They are made to be bulletproof, to take anything you can throw at it. A lot of manuals have Ruger-only loads. They specifically say, only use this load in a Ruger revolver, which I happen to have a Ruger Super Blackhawk 44 Magnum, and it's a badass hand cannon. I love it. But anyway, so those are your books. You got to have these, and then I will go ahead and touch on how you figure out your loads. All right, every gun shoots different. It's just the way it is. This 38 Special isn't going to shoot the same as this 38 Special, even if they're the same make and model. They might have slight differences in machining. So when I go and work up a load, Say I went to work up a load for I got Smith & Wesson Model 28 Highway Patrol 357 Magnum that I worked up my 38 special loads in. So what I'll do is I'll start at the bottom, at the lowest recommended charge, and I'll make 10 rounds of that charge. And then I will go up and up and up. And what I will do is I will do a full box. It'll be 5 different charges. And depending on, say there's 10 grains between minimum and maximum load. So my minimum load, say, is 3 grain. 3 grain. My next step up will be 3.2 grain, and then 3.4, and then 3.6, 3.8, and up like that. And then what I do is I take these cases and I take a Sharpie. I have a bunch of different colored Sharpies, and I will color the primer on the bottom of the case for those 10 rounds. And I have a sheet of paper where I take that color, put a dot of that color, and say what load it was. And then my next 10, I have a different color Sharpie, mark that primer, write down what that load was, and all that until I have a full box with 50 shells, and every 10 shells has a different color primer marked with a Sharpie. And then I will go and have my book, and I will go out to the range. This is pretty unscientific at this point because I don't have a chrono. In order to get the most accurate reading of how your loads are doing, you need a chronometer. I don't have one yet. It's on my wish list. So what I do is I do the good old accuracy test. I have shot my guns enough. I know how they should shoot. I shot a lot of factory ammo through them. So I'll do those 10 rounds. I'll have a target there, and I always aim for dead center. Aim for the X. Don't change it because I'm looking at my groups. I want to see how my groups do, and I'll fire those 10 rounds. I'll take that target down. I'll put another one up. I'll fire my next 10 rounds, aiming for the same point. And on and on and on until I do all 50 rounds. Then I pull my targets out, I lay them out, and I look at them. Sometimes you have to get out a ruler because they can look really close, and I figure out who had the best group. And you got to look out for flyers. If you get a flyer that's way out there that you know wasn't your fault, that you didn't flinch or you didn't jerk the trigger or something like that, that flyer means that you had a pressure spike. There was a very high pressure differential, and that bullet probably jumped your average for FPS. It probably went way out of the norm. What that means is that load isn't good. It's not going to be safe. It's not going to be consistent. It's not going to be accurate. So you look for the smallest group, and whatever that group is, guess what? That's your load for that gun shooting that bullet with that powder. And it's as simple as that. Now, if you use a chronometer, it's even easier because you don't even have to have a target. All you do is fire through the chronometer, and the chronometer will give you the speed of each bullet, the feet per second of each bullet. And then chronometers nowadays will automatically do your calculations for you. For that 10-round spread, it'll tell you what your maximum and minimum velocity were, and it'll tell you your spread in between, which that's the important part. You want the smallest differential, the smallest spread in between your speed. And that's where it is. And it'll tell you if you get a flyer, if your average speed was right around 1,100 feet per second, and then you got one that shot up to 1,300 feet per second. That's not good. The other thing you look at is after you fire the rounds, especially once you get into the higher charges, you need to look for signs of overpressure. One of the biggest signs is if that primer starts backing out of that cup, or if you see the primer flatten there where the dimple, where the firing pin hit, is flattened out, that means there's so much force in there, force that primer out against the face of your bolt or your action, whatever, and with enough force to flatten it. You look for cracks in the side of the case. You look for the head trying to separate. And those are also clues on whether or not a load is safe or not. But generally, just about any load in the book will be safe because they err on the side of caution. They're not going to let you go right to the ragged edge. So that is my initial primer on reloading. And if there's anything I didn't cover in here about the basics that you think I should have, feel free to pop it in the comments. Send me a message, let me know, and I will get an edit up here for that. But for now, I think that was everything. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I covered everything. And Larry, if you're watching, I hope you enjoyed it. I got many more to come, and I hope I can help you make some good decisions on your equipment you're going to use and how you're going to reload, because I know you Marine guys, you boys fire a lot of rounds. You shoot a lot of lead, man. So keep it locked and loaded, keep it safe, keep it happy. I will see you next time.